No, the constituency.
Thank you very much. I do not want to join Honorable Gilbert Olanya in thanking the Attorney General for the courage. At another occasion, I will know how to deal with him. One, Mr. Chairman, if you look at the definition of a foreigner does not mean, but it includes. In my little memory of legislative drafting, when somebody says includes, the definition is so wide that it can incorporate and keep bringing in anybody, and that it will depend on who chooses to enforce the law to bring you into that bracket, as long as they use the word includes. So I wish the draftsman would be clearer to say it means the following people. I have already opined that probably you need to, even when it is ugly, Honorable Kiryowa Kiwanuka, you can quote it by removing the use of that word foreigner and criminalize activity as opposed to the profiling of the word foreigner. I know you're always blunt, that's why you said you do not want to move in circles. But having been here longer than you, it is my advice that in legislation, that's what we do. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, is the definition of foreign interest is not there. When you do the collection for the Attorney General who does not want to meander, when you read the entire bill, you may get a glimpse of what foreign interests they are talking about. But for purposes of criminalizing, there is no definition of what amounts to foreign interest within the, if you read clause 1 and 5 together, which criminalizes. Now, with respect to, and I want to thank, I think the honorable folks, you said Owolweyo. I want to add to the question that he put across when he asked about foreign interest, but also the word sovereignty. You're talking about the protection of sovereignty bill. You also direct Ugandans to protect or promote, I think in clause 5, but you do not tell them in clause 5(3), a person shall not engage in any activity that promotes the interests of a foreigner against interests of Uganda. Now, when you leave ambiguity, you are literally making everybody a potential criminal. Because I don't know, I may not know the interests of those foreigners you're talking about. Supposing their interests rhyme with mine. You're talking about promoting democracy, rule of land, constitutionalism in this country. We may have shared values because this is a global village. So tell me, just be blunt, be audacious and shameless, put across what you want us to do. As subdued Ugandans, we shall oblige. But please do not make them ambiguous to make all of us potentially criminal. Then the activities again, in clause 5(4), clause 5, yes, 4. Again, be clear on which activities you're prohibiting. You don't simply say engage in any activity that promotes the interests of a foreigner. Then you say the person who promotes the interests of a foreigner against the interests of Ugandans commits an offense and is liable, blah, blah. The next comment I have relates to this business of seeking permission from the Minister of Internal Affairs. It has legal, political, and economic ramifications. For the benefit of these young brothers of mine, the ministers who were not there during the days of Idi Amin. Even when you sold your land to go and seek treatment abroad, you would go and line up in the minister's office to be permitted to buy foreign exchange. Some people died because the minister would take long to authorize or refuse. In other cases, the minister refused. And when the minister refused, you had no recourse. Today you can say you have recourse, you can go to a court of law where the Attorney General and I are participants, and you know the kind of backlog you have. By the time you get clearance from General Muhoozi here, I don't know how much economic interest of Uganda you would have had. I want to implore them painfully, because they seem to be hell-bent on having the law go through. Why don't you simply legislate on a reporting requirement? We declare. I would have no problem with the word declaring. But if I must seek permission from the minister, assuming I'm a practicing lawyer, someone has paid me 500 million, then for me to require more payment, then I go to the minister. Secondly, I think Honorable Kauma from Iganga mentioned this, the promotion of corruption. Some people are doing business with foreigners. Business, some of which may involve exports of commodities, others services. Then for me to be able to get money, I must go and seek permission from the minister. There is a problem with that. The other question or comment, normally when you are making a legislation that has penal provisions, you also provide for defenses available. When you do not provide for defenses, you make it a strict liability offense for the individual. I don't know whether it is the intention of the Attorney General to make this law a strict liability offense. And of course, I have problems with telling somebody, you go register with the minister or register as a foreign agent. Really, have you taken us to those levels? Or do you see people going to register as agents of foreign interests? I don't see that happening. Then finally, what is government policy? Because we used to say, just write not a booklet, but give us a volume like you give us in your policy framework, so that we know what your policy is all about, and we know how to walk the red thin thread. And then why don't you just be bold enough to declare which countries are hostile, so that we don't deal with them? Previously, I remember in some election where you declared Rwanda a hostile state. I don't know if you have since removed it from the list. Just publish those countries that you consider hostile, so that Ugandans avoid dealing with them, to avoid problems with you for as long as you are still around. There is this thing, this law called the Money Laundering Act, under which I think FIA, the Financial Intelligence Authority, and then the intelligence services have proceeded to block accounts of most of these NGOs, even without going to court. That law is in existence. Why wouldn't the Minister of Internal Affairs simply consider amending that? If you just want to monitor and provide sanctions without causing us these problems of having to fight. For me, as a person who fights to promote national interest, and the policy even when I do not know it. I find it very difficult to defend this law with the clauses and even the name. So tell us, what is sovereignty? Which sovereignty you want us to enforce? Because you have made it a crime for me not to promote and protect the sovereignty as in the minds. Very, very finally, just to remind the Attorney General that there is a decision in this country of the Supreme Court that even when I tell a lie about and against the government, I may not have been patriotic, but I don't commit an offense. So are you not empowering whoever will be enforcing this law to use discretion, including arbitrary discretion, and criminalizing all Ugandans by making literally every activity across the borders presumably a criminal activity? I thank you.
Very important. I actually thought you would also highlight, you touched on it, as a practicing advocate, representing interests of those who come to invest here. You deal with them on a daily basis. You now will be required to register, to get certification. Yes. Yes, ordinarily you are going through what actually you go through to get a certificate from law council, now to get it from minister in charge of internal affairs. And of course you are an agent of foreign interests, by no, I thought you'd highlight that. Very important. So, and that is clause 14, 15, 16, 17 with regards to practicing advocates. I know law council, when they appear, they'll have to talk about it. But thank you. The learned Attorney General and the Minister are ready to respond. Honorable Kahonda, then I come to you, Honorable Museveni. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
About foreign interest, can refer you to clause 10. If it is not clear, we can clarify it. But we are happy to include a definition of foreign interest, but we thought that clause 10 was saying that any function with the aim of promoting foreign policy in Uganda, that has not been adopted as policy by cabinet, but we can define it. We can take it to clause 1 and define it better. Foreign agent being a spy, it could be a spy, it may not be a spy. I don't know, Honorable Keo.
May I seek clarification? Are there policies and activities that the cabinet has approved so that we could know? Because anything that has not been approved and adopted by cabinet would constitute an offense. So we need to know which ones are those that you have
Anything
adopted.
that has not been adopted by cabinet is not government policy.
So anything, if I act outside that, I'm breaking the law.
Yes.
So where are those that you have adopted?
Pardon?
Where are those that you have adopted in our gazette?
Honorable Member, I think every year you receive a ministry policy statement from almost every ministry. If you look at that, it will normally tell you about the policies in that ministry. Those are normally adopted by cabinet.
Mr. Chairman, why I want the Attorney General to be clear. First of all, those are policy proposals. They bring them here. They are proposals to begin with. Secondly, are you telling Ugandans that they go get those books, read them, anything outside them is criminal?
Yes. You see, Honorable Ssegona, I think you should be the one answering that question instead of me, because you're the ones who receive the policy statements. These policy statements tell you what the policy of government is in that particular area.
That's correct.
Let me answer so you don't interrupt. Otherwise,
no, intervention is acceptable in parliamentary practice. And the reason I am concerned is that we are making a law with the penal provisions and criminal ramifications. Is the Attorney General of this country telling Ugandans that anything outside those policy statements is going to constitute an offense because it's not approved by cabinet? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. For a simple answer, for the public, yes. I am telling the public that policy is not thought in people's minds. Policies of government are recorded in policy statements and laws of that country. So you cannot imagine a policy which is not written anywhere. So that is the simple yes.
But I'm not a public player, I'm a private player. You only criminalize me for what I do against the law. Even policy is not law.
You see, Honorable Ssegona, we are writing a law.
Procedure.
So the moment we write the law, it becomes a law.
Anyway, I'll write my
Procedure?
Yes.
I wonder if we are proceeding well, Honorable Chair, where a member is having exchanges with the Honorable Attorney General at random, which is really hampering the Honorable Attorney General's proceeding. Otherwise, I might behave in a similar manner and another member might, and we will not achieve much. With the highest of respect to my
Members,
land friend.
Let's give the Attorney General ample time to respond, because once we get it right,
To identify the gaps. For example, you will not find any single law in this country, in all the laws that you have mentioned, which says that if you promote a foreign policy in Uganda, it's wrong. There is no such law. So yes, you could say, amend the various laws. We took the policy direction of saying, no, let's write a standalone law. So we don't have any law that's dealing with this particular aspect. Honorable Zijan, yes, you actually raised an important question, and I want to spend some time on this because I think this is where the crux of the matter is. Honorable Zijan says you have a CSO in a particular place which is taking care of orphans, and that aspect resonates well with a foreign funder. Now we are saying, does that person need to register? My simple answer is a no, because it is part of our policy statement. It's part of our constitutional requirement to take care of the indigent and the orphans and etc. So if the NGO or the CSO, its business is taking care of orphans, that is a policy of Uganda, and that one can be supported by anyone. So that's not an agent of a foreigner. So, and I think that's why it's important for us to look at clause 2.2. Now, and I think what we are saying here is that all the CSOs can do whatever they want to do, but what they must be doing is supporting a policy that exists in the country. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to consistently and openly, for example, take out the National Development Plan. That sets out the policy of government, sets out the plan of government, talks about all the things that government wants to do. And therefore, if you have a CSO which is plugging into that, that's not an agent of a foreigner. Even if in another foreign country there is a requirement, rather a policy to take care of orphans, it is not a foreign policy because it is already our policy. So what I'm saying, once the cause is aligned with government policy and government plan and is getting funding for that, that person is not an agent of a foreigner and does not need to get any registration. Honorable Sauda, yes, there could be corruption.
Mr. Chairman, let me get clarification on that. That point you mentioned is very important. You stated clearly that so long as it aligns with our policy, and one of the policies of Uganda is promotion